Hi there, Mirka. I am your interim president, Trista, and I've got fantastic news. On October 24th, I filed this federal lawsuit. It's CV 2500599-TUC for Tucson and JCH for Hinderaker as the judge. Thought y'all might like to see some of my band artwork while you're listening to it. Okay, so it's emergency complaint for declaratory and injunctive relief, including motion for a temporary restraining order. Introduction and nature of the action. 1. This is an emergency action under 28 U.S.C. subsection 2201, 2202, the Constitution and related law, to halt and declare unconstitutional ongoing conduct by the President and certain members of Congress. 2. Plaintiff challenges A. Donald J. Trump's Chump's continued exercise of presidential authority while constitutionally disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, and B, the participation of over 200 congressional Republicans who, without actual evidence of fraud, voted to overturn the 2020 presidential election, thereby giving aid and comfort to insurrection and violating their constitutional oath. 3. Plaintiff also seeks a temporary restraining order to immediately prevent further unconstitutional executive actions pending resolution of this dispute. 4. Plaintiff further contends she is irreparably harmed by having to compete in an election against a candidate who is constitutionally disqualified, placing her at an unfair advantage and undermining the integrity of the electoral process. 5. Meanwhile, the defendant president's policies continue daily to inflict widespread suffering, distracting public focus from accountability for his alleged wrongdoing. These ongoing harms amplify urgency for relief. 6. Plaintiff notes that defendant Chump has been held civilly liable in New York courts for business fraud and discrimination and has been adjudicated a wrongdoer in civil context, further undermining his fitness for office. 7. In state of New Mexico, related to White v. Cuy Griffin, number D-101-CV-2022-00473, New Mexico District Court, September 6, 2022. The court removed a county commissioner for his participation in the January 6 attack on the Capitol, holding that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is self-executing and enforceable by the courts, and that those who engaged in or gave aid or comfort to an insurrection are automatically disqualified from office. This binding interpretation applies equally to Chump and members of Congress who had aided and abetted the insurrection by voting to overturn the 2020 election. 2. Jurisdiction and venue. 7. Jurisdiction arises under 28 U.S.C. subsection 1331 federal question and this court's authority to issue declaratory and injunctive relief under 28 U.S.C. subsection 2201-2202. 8. Venue is proper under 28 U.S.C. subsection 1391E as plaintiff resides in Arizona and the effects and legal controversies extend nationwide. 9. Plaintiff seeks to proceed in form of pauperous because she lacks funds to pay costs and attorney's fees and the interests of Justice Council granting IFP status. 10. Plaintiff requests the court to direct the U.S. Marshal Service to effect service or process on all named defendants. 3. Parties. 11. Plaintiff tristadigenova, independent presidential candidate for 2028 and a registered U.S. voter, bringing these claims on her own behalf and on behalf of all similarly situated voters. 12. Defendant Chump, individually and in his capacity as President of the United States, whose conduct and alleged constitutional disqualification is subject to this action. 13. Defendants, members of the 118th U.S. Congress, Senate, and House who cast objections to the certified 2020 Electoral College vote without credible evidence, thereby assisting insurrection in contravention of their oaths, listed in Appendix A. 4. Factual allegations. 14. On January 6, 2021, the defendant president and allies encouraged and incited a mob to instruct Congress's lawful certification of the 2020 electoral votes. 15. In Anderson v. Griswold, the Colorado Supreme Court held that Chump's actions constituted insurrection under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And 16. In Trump v. Anderson, 601 U.S. 2024, the U.S. Supreme Court held that states may not independently enforce Section 3 for federal offices, reserving that power to Congress, but it did not bar federal judicial enforcement in appropriate cases. 17. Separately, in state of New Mexico, ex related to White v. Cody Griffin, the court found that Section 3 remains an operative and self-executing provision of the Constitution and removed Griffin from office for his involvement in the January 6th insurrection. This case demonstrates that courts have authority to enforce disqualification without further congressional action. 18. Plaintiff therefore asserts that federal courts possess jurisdiction and an obligation to enforce Section 3 when Congress fails to do so, especially against federal officers who aided in an insurrection by attempting to overturn a lawful election. 19. The Colorado Supreme Court in Anderson v. Griswold held that Chump's actions constituted an insurrection, disqualifying him under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. 20. U.S. Supreme Court later in Chump v. Anderson held that states may not enforce Section 3 to disqualify federal candidates, reserving enforcement power to Congress. 21. Thus, the thrust of this complaint is that federal judicial relief is necessary to enforce disqualification under Section 3 when Congress fails to act. 22. Over 200 members of Congress voted unknowingly to reject the certified 2020 election results in the absence of any credible fraud evidence. This conduct constituted aid and comfort to insurrection, violated their oath to support the Constitution, and breached their constitutional duties. 23. Plaintiff is forced to run in an environment tainted by a candidate allegedly unlawfully occupying the highest office, undermining fairness and the legitimacy of the competition and integrity of the entire electoral system. 24. The defendant Chump's administration continues to enact policies, immigration enforcement, military deployment, paramilitary transfers, executive orders that impose daily harm, consume public attention, and shield him from accountability. 25. Public records show Chump was held civilly liable in New York courts for business misconduct and discrimination claims. These judges' judicial findings further attest to his unfitness for public office. 26. Unless this court intervenes, defendants will continue to violate constitutional order, inflict harm, degrade the integrity of elections, and undermine and destroy our democratic institutions. 5. Claims for relief. Count 1. Violation of the 14th Amendment, Section 3, Insurrection Clause. 27. Defendants engaged in, aided, or gave comfort to insurrection and are constitutionally disqualified from holding federal office under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Count 2. Violation of the 5th and 14th Amendments, due process and equal protection. 28. Plaintiff and the electorate are deprived of equal protection and due process by being forced to compete against a constitutionally disqualified candidate and by governmental actions that circumvent the rule of law and lawful elections. Count 3. Unjust enrichment, public corruption, election interference. 29. Defendants accepted unlawful contributions, interfered with electoral processes, and corrupted federal governance in violation of principles of good government and public trust. Count 4. Violation of international human rights norms. 30. Defendants' use of militarized force, extraordinary rendition, detention, and denial of due process implicates obligations under treaties and international law. 6. Prayer for relief. Plaintiff respectfully requests this court to A. Declare that Chump is disqualified from holding office under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. B. Declare that members of Congress listed in Appendix A are likewise disqualified. C. Declare the 2024 federal election results void pending lawful restoration investigation. D. Enjoin Chump from issuing further executive actions, orders, or appointments pending resolutions of this matter. E. Grant a temporary restraining order and subsequently a preliminary injunction barring further unconstitutional acts by the President. F. Order U.S. Marshals to serve process on defendants. G. Refer factual findings to Congress, the Department of Justice, and international bodies, UN Human Rights Council, and ICC. H. Award all further relief the court deems just and proper. Table of authorities, constitutional provisions. U.S. Constitution Amendment, 14th Amendment, Section 3, Insurrection Clause. Congressional authority, the Constitution, Article 1, subsection 5. U.S. Constitution, Article 6, Supremacy Clause. U.S. Constitution Amendment 5, 14th Amendment, Due Process and Equal Protection. Statutes and Rules, 28 U.S.C. subsection 1331, 28 U.S.C. subsection 2201, 2202, 28 U.S.C. Anyway, here's the list. I even prepared a proposed order so Hinderaker can just sign this and get rid of the motherfuckers. Super smart, Trista. I'm getting the courts to serve all these people. Here's the Appendix A. Here are these motherfucking traitors that need to be removed. If you see their name, tell them they got all the usual suspects. I'm Christopher President.